game theory instincts. It's something that just came up to my head right now while watching a long lecture about game theory. So I've been intrigued about game theory for a long time. I haven't quite figured out what that means. So I've just watched 45 minutes lecture introduction to game theory, and that's great. And now what I'm looking for is exactly how can I imply that to the things that I do with children. So I am a sports coach for children, and I also a psychology practitioner. I'm right now starting my second degree and my master's in developmental psychology. So all this idea of game theory was always hovering over my head. That's something that I want to learn, I want to master and understand completely, and what can I do to use it as part of my training, as part of the things that I'm constantly focusing with the kids that I work with, in order to, first of all, make more people better instructors. And also soon I will start really coaching, consulting with parents about how they can be better parents, let's say, and to deal with different issues that their child might have. And all of those have come to me as part of the game theory instinct that just completely came to my head. And I decided to start making a video so I can come up with some ideas maybe for the future that I can continue on developing about that idea. So what exactly is game theory? And as far as I understand right now, game theory is the entire philosophical aspect of understanding relationships and competitive communications with a person to person, business to business, etc. So when it comes to my world of working with kids, game theory comes to understanding human relationships from early development of children. So kids that are just born doesn't really have the human interactions that are considered as the game theory mindset. So let's say competition or simultaneous play or sequential play. So there's two different ways to have a game. Let's say one is to have a simultaneous game. So let's say me and you playing rock paper scissors, right? So you ready? Rock paper scissors, shoot, and then we both in the same time simultaneously do our turn. And that is different from, let's say, a game that is played one back and forth. Okay, so for example, for that sort of a game I know of is for example something easy to understand without any explanation. Third it's for example the game of fingers. So I'm holding two fingers out and you also hold two fingers out. It's my turn, I'm starting, I'm hitting with my finger on yours and you sum up my fingers to yours. And then you hit me, let's say, with the one finger that is still haven't been touched. I have two. Now I hit yours, you have four, and then you hit my two and I'm out. That's a sequential play. So what I thought about is teaching kids the basics of human interactions through those games is something that we subconsciously do. It's the game theory instinct. We teach people how to communicate through the games, so kids don't learn the theoretical part of game theory. They don't learn what exactly sequential game or simultaneous game is. They just understand it along the way. And because I had the privilege to teach so many kids in the past decade, I saw so many interactions of young kids, 4 or 5 years old, that are having difficulties with understanding the human interactions, with understanding the connections between the children, how to play together. And that really gave me the understanding that there might be some issues that are developed in children because they lack the ability to fully understand and comprehend and to take part in games with each other. So let's say one example that I see very common. There is this kid, just it happens a lot of times. Let's just take one scenario. There's a kid who we did some running and it was really fun, and all of a sudden he smacked into another kid. Now both of them fell back from the impact. Didn't really get injured, but it's not nice, especially for the other kid that didn't initiate any running, so it's not in a hyper emotion state. So it was a shock to him. He started crying a bit. And I looked at the kid that smacked into him. Obviously, not his fault. But still, we want in our culture that in this situation, that kid will say sorry for what happened, even though it's not his fault, right? So let's say the kid just smacked into the kid, and in a perfect world, this kid will say, "Oh, I'm sorry I hit you," and continue with his life. But some kids that have a bit harder time communicating, maybe they were victims of the coronavirus closures, right? The quarantines that were, at least in our country, for a very long time. And especially in those early years, it's really important to have those interactions. And they didn't have them. So what happened is this kid just looked at me and he's like, just ignores completely what just happened. That's a very common response that I see with kids that having this communicational difficulty. So let's say that this kid is having now to deal with this situation and he doesn't have the necessary skills to understand that there is supposed to be a sequential events here. So you hit someone by accident. You need to say, "I'm sorry," and the other kid needs to say, I understand. It's everything is okay," or "Thank you," or maybe he will say sorry as well. But something has to be done. There's supposed to be an exchange of communication here, and there was none. So what I said to this kid is, "Hey, in those situations, you should say, 'I'm sorry.'" And at start, he had a little bit of rejection to that educational, let's say, part that I gave him. So I told him, do that. Say, "I'm sorry. I know it's not your fault, but say I'm sorry. That's what you're supposed to do in those situations." And after a while, he did say that, "I'm sorry," and the other kid said, "It's okay." They were 5 years old. And I came to this child who said, "I'm sorry," and I said, I'm so glad that you said it, and I'm so proud of you for doing that. It's the right thing to do." And I thought to myself, wait, how come this kid doesn't know how to do that? And I see that often with kids that are the firstborn of the family. So let's say the kid is with his family and just himself with his parents, didn't really have that many interactions, just like explained right now. And what needs to be done in those situations is the kid needs to learn from his peer group's experiences, and sometimes that can be lacking, especially if there's quarantine for 2 years. So unlike, let's say, a second-born child or third-born child that has these experiences with their seniors and siblings, right? So they have experienced those emotions, those situations, and they are very skilled with developing them because they see that firsthand at home where it's safe, and not at school where sometimes if you don't learn in the right time, you get bullied, you get outcast because you just don't fit in because you don't understand the game. That's where game theory comes in. Game theory, I believe, with kids has everything to do with communication, or at least that's how I interpret it. So kids need to learn how to game, okay? And by that I mean to communicate with each other, to understand social cues, having tact. So lately I've been really focused on tact. And tact, it means to understand situations and act accordingly without making other people hate you and feel uncomfortable around you to a certain extent. Because of course you can't always satisfy everyone. That's a bad goal to try again. But to a certain extent, you really want people to feel comfortable around you. To a certain extent, okay? Don't be a people pleaser. That's when you go over the top and it starts to have a negative effect. It's always to find the right point at the scale. So kids that have difficulties with understanding tact are having really difficulties as they grow up. And I think a lot of parents, even though they have really sufficient tact, it's not always passed to their children, and I believe it's because they don't really have many experiences of that. How do we learn certain words, even though it seems like we never heard them before? So the answer is simple. You probably sometime in your life came across those words, and to expand your vocabulary, you need to be exposed to more words. Otherwise, you will never know that they exist. So same thing with activities, with behaviors. Let's say that you've never experienced the overcoming of fear. So you've been fearful and you learned how to regulate your breath, your emotions. You saw someone do it. You got coached by your parents through it. So you learned, it's social learning, right? Of how to deal with emotions. Same thing with learning to communicate. You learn by seeing someone else saying sorry when you hit someone. So in that situation, I had a class. So all the other 7 students the same age saw that interaction, and now they know if you accidentally hit someone and it falls over, you say I'm sorry, even though you might not be sorry, but that's what you do. That's part of the game. And if you don't play the game, you will certainly lose, because who wants to play with someone who doesn't know how to play the game, right? It's just like playing soccer with this kid who always grab the ball with the hands and start running. I mean, who wants to play with you? You just don't follow the rules. And the same thing goes for adult life, and being as civil as possible, right? Because if you're not civil, who wants to be your mate? Who wants to be your friend? And who wants to hire you? Because if you don't understand and be capable of following rules, then you're not you're not the best version you can be for society. Maybe for yourself, people that don't follow the rules sometimes can be high achievers, but I don't know. I believe that you always need to understand that you're part of a community and a culture, and to a certain extent, you need to be a bit compliant to your surroundings. Otherwise, I believe that will affect your happiness, and because we are always valuing our worth with our connections to the people around us, right? That maybe you can say it's wrong, but I personally believe that it is a essence of being human to be part of a community, and teaching kids that is so important. So game theory for me with kids comes to game theory instincts, because you can go to economists and they will speak about the idea that you can learn about certain economical behaviors, right? So there's the understanding of relationships between competitors and marketplace, and all those stuff that are very theoretical, that can be applied through logical explanations. But there is so much to game theory, at least I see it, that is just completely implicit. So it's not viewed. You can't see that. You can't teach it by words. You can only teach it by feeling, by instinct, by the vibe, so by the tact. You see that and you understand that almost completely without explanations, right? If you see a kid that doesn't function properly in his surrounding, that you feel something is wrong there, you feel something is off. You might say, oh, maybe this kid is autistic, because autistic kids doesn't necessarily understand human relationship situations, communication situations. So that might something be that to do with the development of game theory instincts with kids that doesn't have the, let's say, the problems of the artistic difficulty with developing communicational skills and understanding other people's emotions. The theory of mind is called. A lot of game theory, I believe, has to do with theory of mind, understanding how the other people think and operate. So again, I believe that teaching kids how to develop the game theory instinct is a really important aspect of the development, especially their cultural, social development. And what I would highly suggest you to think about is, what exactly am I already doing when I'm teaching kids about this game theory mindset? And over that, how much of it am I not teaching because I lack the understanding of the importance of teaching it? I understand now, because I had so many classes that I've done with kids, that some of them have real difficulties handling with situations that they have never faced. Just like this, hit the kid, fell down, never did it, never felt it, and is looking at me and he doesn't know how to respond. So let's say I just quit on this kid. Didn't really give him that much of a focus in that moment. And I just said, oh, get up, nothing happened. What would that teach the kid? It would teach him that, oh, yeah, so that's how you handle the situations. Now he needs to learn to ask sorry. And he shrugged his shoulders when I told him to say sorry, because that's his normal reactions. It's a frightful little kid. He doesn't know how to handle it. But because I forced him to say sorry, I believe that opened a new, let's call it a neural link or a classic or operational behavior responses. So now he knows when that happens, I need to do this. And we all do that sometimes correctly and sometimes incorrectly. Let's say if you want to go and approach a person that you find attractive and you are fearful of doing it, that's because there was this connection that was built. Maybe because you didn't go in the past to people, or maybe because you went to someone and you got rejected or humiliated, and that's something that you now associate as poorly. You associate poorly, so you don't go and try it. So I think that because I told the kid, you need to say sorry for that kid that you just bumped into, even though it's not your fault. I'm not saying it's your fault, but you need to say sorry. That creates the association. Okay, when I hit someone, I need to say sorry, and it doesn't have to do whether I'm at fault or not, because I don't want it to focus on if I was at fault or not. That's game theory again, because you can say, oh, what do I benefit by saying sorry, it wasn't my fault? If I say sorry, it might imply that it's my fault. No, it's about playing the games. The rules are, if you hit someone, you need to say I'm sorry. And I think that's why it's so important to have kids experience a lot of things. When they experience a lot of different situations, scenarios like that, that sometimes are not that simple or are not that, let's say, comfortable. If you don't put them through those uncomfortable, I call it frustration training for children, then they end up losing some of the game theory instincts that they could have developed if someone would have given them the opportunities to fail or to feel this aversive, negative emotions and hold them accountable during those times. They would never develop this game theory instinct. And I believe that a lot of it has to do with games. I use games a lot as part of my classes to have kids experience real dynamic situations in a fun, playful way that demands of them higher understanding of their social interactions in that game and about the rules. You will break the rules. It's not fun anymore. Let's say we did a game that you have to be on your knees and push each other until someone falls over. That's a game from judo. And all of a sudden one of them starts standing on his legs instead of his knees. Now he has a better advantage of ground control. But the other kid doesn't want to go on his legs because that's not part of the rules. And get dominated by the kid who stood on his legs. That creates so many situations and little details that can create the situation either poorly controlled and processed and make both of the kids hate each other, or even worse, develop bad associations of how to handle situations like this, or can be modeled correctly and learn to communicate. And another example I see a lot is with kids that have difficulty about being in line. So there is always this kid who passes the line. There's a line of 4 kids and the 5th kid decides, I don't care about this, I'll go first. Or I don't know, interrupt them in the other way that isn't civil. And I always see that as the kid that has a bit of a difficulty with what I would call the game theory instinct. And this kid completely breaks the rules in that situation. He breaks the rules. He doesn't care what other kids thinks about him. He just wants to get what the line is about. Let's say to do this amazing obstacle course in my class, and then the kid the other kids completely lash at him. You passed the line. They come to me and say, this kid, he passes the line. I don't like him. I hope he goes away. And creates all this situation that what exactly did you win here? Was that worth let's say response? Is it worth it? The game? No, it doesn't worth it. It's much better to play together and have fun together, because now you are part of the group and not the bullied kid eventually, right? Or maybe the bully is also outcast, right? He's not part of the group. So in that situation, he's the bully because he passes everyone. It doesn't care about the others. But in the same time, they create a really separation from him, and that eventually can be very detrimental for the kid. So that's all I have to say about game theory instinct. And I believe that parents, instructors, and consultants needs to learn to use game theory instinct as part of their daily interactions with kids. Because if you don't teach kids the game theory instincts, you will definitely give them a hard time handling tough human dilemmas, whether that be in their youth life or in their adult life. So that's it for today. See you next time. Bye bye.